Good afternoon, everyone. iTech India welcomes all the participants to today's National Distance Learning Seminar Series. Today's topic is vaccines in CLHIV, and the speaker is Dr. Kalpana Datta. Dr. Kalpana Datta is a professor of pediatric medicine, Medical College, Kolkata, and program director, PCOE MCH, Kolkata. She is a national trainer of IMSAM, state trainer for ARSH, and specialist trainer in pediatric HIV. She is a guide for thesis, project and research, an adjudicator for postgraduate thesis, and a recognized examiner for UG and PG. She has several publications in national and international journals. We welcome you, ma'am, to today's session.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll be talking on vaccine in child living with HIV. This is the immunization is one of the trend in the worldwide campaign, and we know the prevention is better than cure. So for that, the vaccination is one of the important aspects for the preventing the vaccine preventable disease. Now I'm sharing my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's audible also clearly?
Audible, clear, ma'am. Please switch to full mode. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all for attending this session, and I'd like to thank the Sheta and Mr. Parveen for arranging this such NDLS. And now I'll be starting on the vaccines in child living with HIV. So before going to the exact vaccines, what are the vaccines can be given in the children, we should have a basic knowledge of immunology. What is immune system? How does it act? How does it behave with the vaccines? Now, how does it confers the immunity against the infections? Then I'll be discussing on the types of the vaccines. What are the vaccines available in our country, in our market, or in the government setup, or in the private setup? Impact of vaccine on disease epidemiology. Here I'll be discussing how the vaccine preventable disease is serious and causes morbidity and mortality in children living with HIV, and how can the vaccine can prevent these infections. And we know the HIV children are a bit immunocompromised as compared to the non-infected children. Even the exposed children are also immunocompromised compared with the unexposed children. So the efficacy and the safety will vary according to the immune status. Then there's a term called adverse event following immunization. So though we say all the vaccines are safe, but there are some incidents which can take place during immunization. I'll be discussing in short, and that is called AEFI, advanced event following immunization. The last but not the least, the vaccine schedule given by the Government of India and academic bodies like Indian Academy of Pediatrics, CDC guidelines, and other guidelines are there. So I'll be discussing in bit brief with these guidelines. So first, what is immunization? And in case of children, because of the children are the innocent victims of HIV and AIDS, and the 90% of the infection is coming through the vertical transmission. So from the mother to the baby. And it progresses very rapidly in young children because of the immature immune system, increased viral load, and other comorbid like severe malnutrition. It can cause severe progression and can die, 30% die in the first year, and 40 to 50% can die in the second year. So there's rapid progression of the disease. And these infections are susceptible, these children are susceptible to the vaccine preventable disease much more, and will cause much more morbidity and mortality. So it is more likely to develop severe complications as compared to the immunocompetent children. All children are prone to develop vaccine preventable disease, but the children exposed to HIV infection or infected with HIV infections are more prone to develop complications, and it also increases the mortality rate. Now, what is immunization? It is a proven tool for control and eradication of infection. The most cost effective, if you consider the treatment of the disease, the hospital admission, the burden of the economical burden, the family and its society. So vaccine is very much cost effective to decrease the morbidity and mortality. Universal immunization program in India has no formal guideline for children living with HIV. So Government of India didn't have any guideline till now. And what we are following according to the CDC guideline, or Indian Academy of Pediatrics has launched a guideline in HIV infection, children with HIV infection or other immunocompromised children, like patient on dialysis, patient having chronic renal failure, or other immunosuppressive agents. We follow that guideline. And there's a guideline for immunization guideline for HIV infected children by CDC, uh, Association of Community of Immunization Practice in American Academy of Pediatrics, and WHO. There's a 3 guidelines are there, and we will discuss a bit about those guidelines. Now there is how the immunization program has started in our country, what is the timeline, and what is the programmatic issues. Universal immunization program is the vaccination program launched by the government of India getting back in 1985. Then thereafter it is incorporated with the Child Survival and Safe Motherhood Program in 1992, that is called CSSF program. And then it is came under the National Rural Health Mission and National Urban Mission. Now we call it National Health Mission, neither rural nor urban. And it is from the 2004-5. And then in 2014, there's a mission Indradhanush. We know in Indradhanush, there are 7 colors. Similarly here, the 7 vaccines, they started with the 7 vaccines. Then they have included other vaccines gradually. Now 16 vaccines are there. And there's a mission Indradhanush intensified. Again, it was intensified. And again, a few vaccines are launched. And there's a special drive to vaccinate those who were not vaccinated or partially vaccinated children and pregnant women by 2020, especially where the unreachable areas or the migrant populations, like the children of daily wages, migrant populations, hilly areas, which is very difficult to reach, and that areas were taken care of in this mission in the intensified launch program. Now, a few words about the immunology. In our body, we have a basic innate immunity. That is, we have already the prepared immunity in our body, and it comprises the skin. We know the skin is the largest barrier of our body, and if there's a breach in the skin, then it will incite the infection. So it can protect the infection. In a healthy skin, will protect the skin infection. Second, the mucosal barriers like nasal mucosa, gut mucosa. If there's a breach in the mucosal barrier, then there will be infection. So in the mucosa, we have some lymphocytes, and they're the integrated the mucosal membrane can prevent the infection. Like in upper respiratory tract infection can breach the mucosal layer of the nasal mucosa, and there will be a chances of H. influenza type B infection leading to meningitis. Similarly, we have prepared already in our body, there's a phagocytes like neutrophils, monocytes, and macrophages. They cause of opsonization of the bacteria and killing of the bacteria, and the natural killer cells. These are already there in our body, and they don't identify the type of infection. Whatever the infection, they will start acting and will kill the very first hand. So this is called innate immunity. Second is the adaptive immunity. That the immunity which will be adapted according to the exposure. So it is provided by the lymphocytes T and B lymphocytes. Like B lymphocytes, if there's infection, then B lymphocyte will produce according to the infected organism. They will produce immunoglobulins, antibodies, and different antibodies will be there according to the specific antigens. It may be antigens, maybe the infective organism, or it may be vaccines. Second is the T lymphocyte. T cell lymphocyte provides cell-mediated immunity. So B lymphocyte immediately acts, and T lymphocyte acts. It takes some time to act, and there will be formation of memory cells in T lymphocyte. So it will long-lasting. B lymphocyte immunity will the short-lasting immunity. And the innate immunity system triggers the development of adaptive immunity, presenting the antigen to B and T lymphocytes. So the innate immunity, like the natural killer cells, antigen-presenting cells, it will stimulate the B lymphocyte and T lymphocyte, thereby the long-term immunity will be developed in our body in response to the either the antigen in form of infection or vaccine. So vaccine, we stimulate innate immunity are better immunogens. So when the vaccines are given which stimulate the innate immunity, that will cause long-lasting and strong immunity in our body. Now, what is humoral versus cell-mediated immunity? As I said, the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes are responsible for adaptive immunity. So B lymphocyte is responsible for humoral immunity. It is the principal defense mechanism against the extracellular microbes and their toxins. So when there's the entry of extracellular microbes or the toxins, B lymphocytes start secreting the antibodies a different type. It may be IgE, IgM, whatever the types, and it acts by either neutralization of the toxin or the microbial toxin or the ready-made toxins, or by forming the complement activation system, or by opsonization and phagocytosis. It will opsonize the bacteria, which will be killed by the neutrophils and other phagocytic cells. Then the cell-mediated immunity. It is the principal defense mechanism against the intracellular microbes. So it is mediated by T cells. So when there is an entry of the intracellular microbes, the T cell will be stimulated, there will be secretion, and the T cell mediated immunity will be there. There will be formation of memory cells. And when we give the booster, these memory cells start acting again, producing antibodies. So it will pass it for long. Now, what is active immunity versus passive immunity? Vaccination is always an active immunity. Active immunity means when the body starts producing antibodies against some antigens. So resistance developed in response to stimulus by antigen, which may be infective agent or vaccine, and is characterized by the production of antibody in the host cell. So active immunity is the production, and passive immunity means when we are ready-made, we are giving the ready-made antibodies to the body. So immunity conferred by antibody produced in the outside the host. It may be acquired naturally or artificially through antibody containing preparations. So if you go through this chart, you will see the specific defense mechanism, active versus passive immunity. As I said, active immunity means the body will produce antibodies. So it may be natural, it may be acquired. Natural means when there is the following clinical infections. If we have some infection, thereafter body will develop antibody against that infection, and it will be there in the body. Or there may be, it may be subclinical infection, means infection is there but clinically not manifested, and there is a formation of antibody against that infective organism. Or it may be acquired active immunity, like when you give the vaccines. When you give the vaccines, and body will act against this vaccine and will produce antibody, that is called active immunity. Then again, the passive immunity may be naturally acquired, like transplacental transfer of maternal antibody, already prepared antibody in the mother, and that is transplanted through the placenta or during the breast milk. And acquired antibody, when we give some immunoglobulin preparation, like hepatitis B immunoglobulin, varicella zoster immunoglobulin, other immunoglobulin, or rabies immunoglobulin. So when you are giving the ready-made formation of immunoglobulin as an injectable form to the host, then they confer the immunity, that is the passive immunity acquired by the introduction of ready-made immunoglobulins. So what are the immunizing agents? Immunization is the process of giving vaccine. So what are the immunizing agents? It may be vaccines, as I already said, it may be immunoglobulins, that is ready-made antibodies, and it may be the anti-sera. Now vaccination. Vaccination is the method of giving antigen to stimulate the immune response through active immunization. A vaccine is immunobiological substance designed to produce specific protection against the specific disease. So sometimes we give the hepatitis B vaccine for hepatitis B, hepatitis A vaccine for hepatitis A infection. So specific vaccine for a specific disease. And it is usually when we give the live, it is usually antigenic but not pathogenic, like live attenuated. Means pathogenic activity is lost but the antigenic potentiality is retained. That is called attenuated. So what are the types of vaccine? It may be live attenuated vaccines like polio, BCG, measles and rubella combinations, or measles, mumps, rubella combination, or it may be kill vaccine. So again in kill vaccine, it may wholesale kill vaccine, or it may be the kill vaccine and there may be derived subunits from that vaccines. Sometimes we use the subunits of the kill vaccine and use as a vaccine preparations. So the toxoids are kill organisms like toxoids. When you use the toxoid of the kill vaccine, that is diphtheria and tetanus toxoid, kill organism wholesale, that's a wholesale pertussis. When we use the subunits like polysaccharide part, that is our polypeptide vaccine, that is pneumococcal vaccines, and some subunit vaccines like a Hib vaccine and hepatitis B vaccine. The different types of vaccines available in a country, live attenuated vaccines like BCG, oral polio, measles, mumps, rubella, influenza, Japanese encephalitis, rotavirus vaccines. Kill vaccines, typhoid, cholera, pertussis, rabies, injectable polio, influenza, Japanese encephalitis. We do have a kill vaccine also. Toxoid, diphtheria toxin and tetanus toxoid. Silver fraction vaccine, meningococcal polysaccharide vaccines, pneumococcal vaccines, hepatitis B vaccines, and recombinant vaccine also hepatitis B vaccines. Immunoglobulins and antisera. Immunoglobulins are human normal immunoglobulins like hepatitis A, measles, rabies, tetanus, and mumps. Specific immunoglobulins for hepatitis B, like hepatitis B, varicella, and diphtheria. Non-human immunoglobulins like diphtheria, toxin, gas gangrene, botulism, and rabies, that is antisera or the horsecoina serum, you can get it. Now, vaccination in a children living with HIV. The majority of children born to women who are infected with HIV, not acquired infections. So they are exposed uninfected children. Maximum of those children who become infected, most acquired the virus from their mothers at the time of delivery or short after thereafter. So maximum transmission takes place if at all they are infected from the perinatal period, means the time of delivery and just after that. Early in life, they are immunologically normal or immunosuppressed will be minimal. Because we know as the maximum transmission takes place in the perinatal period, so it will take time to suppress the immunity in the baby. So they are either immunologically normal as compared to the other normal children, and will be, if at all, then it will be very minimal. But most of the primary series of vaccines are either started or completed. So we know that the primary series is usually completed by 6, 10, 14 weeks. So, and until then, the immunity is not so much suppressed. So we can give any vaccines which are available in and can be given in other HIV non-infected children. Safety of the vaccine in children living with HIV. The immunization is generally safe and beneficial for children living with HIV. Although HIV-induced immune suppression reduced the available vaccines compared to that obtained in HIV-infected children. So vaccines given in children who are not infected with HIV and vaccine given in the children with exposed and infected, exposed and uninfected. If you compare, the antibody response is less who are exposed and uninfected and exposed and infected than the who are not infected. Thus, unless the child has rapidly progressive HIV related diseases, usual routine vaccination should be offered according to the age group. So, immunization and effect of HIV infection. Now, what will happen in the HIV? HIV-infected children develop immune dysfunction, affecting all aspects of the immune system with the increasing age. So, gradually, as they will grow, there is no intervention will take, then and there will be a disturbed immune system in the body, and that will lead to immune suppression, and the results in increased risk of severe disease from vaccine preventable infections. So, if we don't give the vaccines and baby is going and there's immunosuppressions, and if they are exposed to that vaccine preventable diseases, it will cause severe infection and increase the morbidity as well as mortality. It affects the quantity and quality and persistent and protective immune response to natural infection or vaccinations. So if there is a naturally immune response is there or acquired immunity from the mother, like passive transfer of placental antibody, it will be also low because mother are infected. Mother is poor, so mother immune system is not so robust. So formation of antibody against the infection in the mother is also low. So transmission of antibody from the mother, infected mother to the exposed baby is also low. The immunization children of the living with HIV, the following areas of concern and are critical to children while giving the vaccine. You should be concerned about this. Will the effectiveness of the vaccine be impaired because of the underlying immune deficiency? So whenever we give a vaccine, we ask this question to ourselves. Are children receiving a live viral vaccine or bacterial vaccine subject to significantly increased risk compared to non-infected persons? Does administering a vaccine significantly affect the rate of progression of the or associated disease? Emerging areas of okay? Voice is okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Emerging areas of concern. What is the emerging areas of concern? Impaired seroconversion, clinical efficacy. So when we are giving vaccine, how much seroconversion will be there? How much it will be clinically effective for preventing the disease? Need for increased amount or number of dose? Whatever the dose we are giving in a normal children, is it safe and sufficient to maintain the antibody formation for against the disease? So whether we have to increase the dose or increase the number. Safety issues associated with live vaccines. We know the live vaccine can jolly will given in a non-infected children. Can it be given in the children infected with HIV? Can it cause disease progression? So these things to be answered before giving the vaccine. Decreased duration of protective efficacy. So some vaccines we give in children and it causes long-lasting efficacy. So whether it will be applied in a case of HIV infected children also, or we want to give a revaccination. Effect of vaccine on the rate of HIV progression. So this vaccine will, whether it will interfere the progression of the disease or it propagate the disease or will halt the disease HIV progressions or any effect on the HIV progressions. These things to be answered while before giving the vaccinations. So HIV infected children, this is the circle I have shown because mother is also HIV infected immunodeficient. So production of antibody is less in the mother also. So it does not have protective antibody against infection. So poor transplacental acquisition of antibodies. So babies who are exposed to HIV infection, whether infected or uninfected, have a less amount of antibody from the mother, both through the placental transfer or through the breast milk. Then susceptibility to infection at an early age. So as the antibody is low, they will be more susceptible to infection at a younger age. However, the mother may get the infection from vaccine preventable disease and can transfer this disease horizontally and exposing the children for those infections. So they are more prone to develop infection, which are vaccine preventable diseases. So let's see the increased morbidity and mortality in HIV infected children from vaccine preventable diseases. Hepatitis B vaccine in HIV infected children, a common risk factor for mode of transmission. We know hepatitis B and HIV has share common risk factors, the mode of transmissions. Co-infection increases mortality by 8%. As I've said, we have to answer the question whether they increase the morbidity or HIV progression. Here we see the hepatitis B with HIV infection as if the co-infection is there, the mortality will be increased by 8%. HIV infected children are also vulnerable to reactivation of occult HIV infection. Hep B. So if the Hep B infection in occult form and there's acquisition of HIV infection, that will be manifested. Similarly, we know in tuberculosis also. And there will be chances of chronicity is higher and lower rate of loss of serum anti-surface antigens. So chronicity and formation long lasting will be more in case of co-infection. Ongoing HIV viremia limits the successful vaccination in hepatitis B. And it has been studied by Bug et al. It has seen if 3 doses schedule 016, 95 to 95% healthy individuals are protected. But in case of positive children, only 20 to 70% are protected if you consider anti-HSV 10 to 100 international unit per liter. 3 doses schedule is not as effective in HIV positive compared to the HIV negative person. So children on ART would be benefit from the revaccination, but level of protective immunity needs to be monitored. Some children require additional vaccine. So from this study, they have suggested that these babies either need the extra dose or increased dose. Now, what about the tuberculosis? HIV positive children are increased risk of developing tuberculosis of 50% of infection. If there is a primary complex, it may cause the progressive primary tuberculosis. Chances of extra hepatic tuberculosis, pulmonary tuberculosis much more in HIV children. And there's a infection with HIV, strong risk factor for progression from the active tuberculosis, from the latent tuberculosis. It is more severe, progressive, and likely to occur extra pulmonary site. More of the drug resistance is higher. Recurrent disease and relapse is more common with HIV infected children. The mortality rate is high, especially when the CD4 count decreases. Incidence of TB in the study done by the Basavaraja et al. In 2012, they have shown the HIV infected children have 6 to 8 fold of higher risk of TB. And if you consider the positive children, then 20 to 25 fold higher incidence. So exposed is much higher than the non-exposed children. 25 to 60% all hospitalized children with TB are HIV positive. They have studied in children who are admitted in a hospital. Out of HIV children, 25 to 60% are positive. TB related death is quite high, 18.8% if they are HIV infected. And TB was a coefficient in their study is a 30, around 26.6% are co-infected. Pulmonary TB, the 14%, TBM was on the 5%, disseminated TB was 3% in their study, and bone TB is 2.5%. So if you compare the all form of TB infection in children with the HIV are much more than the non-infected children. Similarly, in measles and HIV in developing nation, mortality rate attributed to measles has been increased to 50% HIV infected children. That is given in a Committee of Infectious Disease. They have commented that 50% chances of having mortality more than the non-infected children. And in another study, Moses et al. In 2008, they have taken 1,475 cases and studied in 50% were HIV positive with the co-infection. They have seen that the much more infection in younger ages, in less than 9 months, is if you compare with the non-HIV infected children. So in conclusion, HIV infected get measles infection at a younger age, means below 9, and more like to die with the measles. As if in our program, we give the vaccine at 9 months, and we know maternal antibody persists till 6 months. So there is a window between 6 months to 9 months, and chances of infection is higher in non-HIV infected children than the HIV non-infected children. Similar study in H influenza type B infections, frequent cause of pneumonia and meningitis both, and it's higher in HIV infected children. Mortality is also higher in HIV infected children, it's 11.5%. So impaired HIV influenza type B transplacental antibody transmission and declining antibody every decade through the first year of life represent more potential vulnerabilities for HIV exposed but uninfected infants. So even they are exposed and not infected, then also they are more prone to develop HIV, H influenza type B pneumonia or meningitis as compared to the uninfected children. Similar study in varicella also, usually in HIV infected children, varicella becomes atypical. There may be hemorrhagic rash that may continue for many months, and there may be chances of dissemination leading to especially encephalitis and stroke in children. Complications are much more in varicella with HIV like pneumonia, hepatitis, encephalitis, disseminated intravascular coagulation and retinitis. And if you see the formation of future varicella zoster infections, much more is 115 times as compared to the non-infected children. So if there is a varicella infection in the children, the chances of having varicella zoster in the afterward is very much higher in infected and exposed children. Similarly, in the pertussis, we have seen there's a higher incidence of infection and mortality, and it is a severe course, protracted course, increased mortality if they are HIV infected. Now, what is the efficacy of vaccine if you give the vaccine in infected children or exposed children, and what is the seroconversion rate? So, level of effectiveness in HIV uninfected children, the risk of developing disease is not possible to evaluate the risk of disease in individual child, and figures from the study or literature may be quoted. So, efficacy of vaccine, no vaccines provide 100% protection to the most of the, so cannot say 100% protection. Though you can say 99% protection, sometimes we do say it's a full protection, but there are some risks. Almost absolutely protective in 99% cases in measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, diphtheria and tetanus toxoid, especially in uninfected children. Highly protective in 80 to 95% in polio, BCG, hepatitis B, and pertussis vaccine. Moderately protective in case of 40 to 60% cases in typhoid, cholera vaccine, influenza kill vaccine, but it is higher now as we have a conjugate typhoid vaccines. Concerns regarding defective vaccines response in HIV infected host. Defective primary immune response, so destruction of function and alteration of antigen presenting cells. As I've already said, in innate immunity, we have antigen presenting cells which stimulate the active immunity cells like T cell and B cells after vaccination, and that is defective, and there's a destruction, and there's a functional destruction also in APCs. So direct effect of HIV on B cells, high level of antigen non-specific hypergammaglobulinemia, failure of B cells to proliferate on stimulation, in formation of humoral antibody. As soon as there's exposure of vaccine, B cell starts proliferating. But in case of HIV infected children, they fails to proliferate, so formation of humoral antibody is also less. Defect in generation of immunological memory. In cell-mediated immunity, we know there is a stimulation of T cells and formation of memory cells that will help the formation of antibody and boosting effect afterwards. But that is also defective in case of HIV-infected children, and indirect effect of HIV impaired T cells help on B cells. As the B cells do not proliferate, so B cell helps in the dependent T cells, and that also causes impaired response by the T cell mediated immunity. Effective capacity of B cells to differentiate in response to CD40 and B cell receptor trigger. Because B cell has to differentiate to form different type of immunoglobulins, that is also defective in HIV infected children. Clonal deletion, depletion of memory T and B cells in HIV infected children, so that will cause loss of immunity. Now, if you see the BCG vaccinations, 70% response rate in children born to negative mother, whereas 30% in a positive mother, and 57% if HIV exposed and uninfected. So it's lower than the non-infected, non-exposed children. BCG vaccine induce immune changes in HIV-exposed infants, including an increase in the proportion of activated CCR5, CD4 HIV target cells. So these findings provide insight into the optimal BCG vaccine timing to minimize the risk of HIV transmission and to expose infants while preserving potential benefits conferring by BCG vaccination. So we have to decide when to give BCG, whom to give BCG to get the proper vaccination coverage. And measles vaccine, the seroconversion rate also low in case of measles. As I've already said, 25 to 30% infected children have responded to a single standard titer measles vaccine in the most of the studies. And there's another study, it has been seen, they have taken a huge number of children, 15,363 children vaccinated as to the adverse events, and they have shown that children had a lower seroresponse rate after primary vaccination compared to the HIV unexposed infants. And if you treat the children with ART, then the response will be higher because the immune will be restored. Vaccines at 6 months result in similar proportion of HIV infected children having seroresponse compared to the HIV unexposed and HIV exposed and uninfected children. So if you give the vaccine at the lower age, then response is similar to the non-infected children. But if you give the vaccine in the after age, like in 9 months, then the response is lower than the uninfected children. So improved response to standard titer measles vaccine administration, infants acquire less transplacental antibody and lose them early. So 2 doses of measles vaccine given at 6 to 9 months results better protection in HIV positive children compared to single dose. Till now in our government protocol, we give the first vaccine as the 9 months along with the rubella vaccine. But if you give the 2 doses, that will give better protection in positive children as compared to negative children. Now, effectiveness and seroconversion rate of hepatitis B, as we showed, the 3-dose schedule for hepatitis B is not as effective in infected than in positive children. Positive children, the response is low in 3 doses schedule, so they should give the extra dose, and sometimes you may need the double dose. Person with the undetectable viral loads have a higher chances of having protective antibody titers after hepatitis B vaccine. So the viral load is very important. Whether if it's a high, the response will be low. If the viral load is low, then the hepatitis B vaccine response will be quite good. 3 double dose schedule in HIV positive children, 100% response if more than CD4 or 200. And if the less than 200, you see the response was only 47%. And it was studied by meta-analysis by Neil et al. In 2013. There's a Kalavati Sharan study, and the CD4 count with the heavy seroconversion, they have taken a mean age 8.8 years, and the CD4 count was 772 plus minus 436. 80% children on ART. Double dose, 4 dose they have given 0, 1, 2, and at 6 months or at 12 months, the seroconversion studied 1 month after the last dose. Excuse me. So birth dose with the 3 more doses given, and they have studied the antibody response after one month after the last dose, and they have seen the after giving the 4 doses, 93% had a protective level that is more than 10 microgram per DL. So 3 doses is insufficient or not sufficient in the child infected with the HIV. Similarly, pertussis vaccine level, the agglutinin level is lower in HIV infected and HIV exposed than the uninfected children. It is 30% versus 55%. a low antibody level with a severe immunodeficiency. If the CD4 is low, then the further response is further deteriorated. A study from South African HIV unexposed and exposed infant indicated 3 to 4 doses of acellular pertussis containing vaccines are required. So again, in pertussis response is lower in HIV exposed, both in infected and non-infected as compared to HIV unexposed infants. Now, vaccine safety and the risk of disease with the live vaccines. Non-replicating vaccines are not associated with the increased risk of or any complications, means kill vaccines. But the live vaccines like BCG, measles, oral polio, yellow fever vaccines have been reported to be associated with the complications in severe depressed immunity. So if CD4 is quite low, the immunity is suppressed. These vaccines can cause deleterious effects and can increase the mortality also. So immune suppression, in case of BCG vaccine, immune suppression in HIV exposed babies usually takes several months to develop. So it will take time. Administration BCG to HIV infected children in the first few months is associated with a low rate of complication because in the early years, the early months of the life, they are not immunosuppressed. So if we give the complications are less, because Government of India says BCG can be given up to 1 year. It should be given either at birth or can be given up to 1 year. So if you give in the later age, chances of complications are more. And if you give the early life, the complications are less. Progressive immune suppression can also lead to the reactivation of latent BCG organism. So if you give the BCG in the later part of the age and there's a immune suppression, then there may be a BCGnosis. That is, there's a regional and extra-regional localized or disseminated BCG disease will be there. There may be regional lymphadenitis, poorly healing ulcers, fistulas, and there may be disseminated lymphadenitis. Sometimes there may be disseminated tuberculosis also. Vaccine safety in HIV infected children. So live vaccine not to be used if the CD4 is less than 200 or less than 15% below 5 years. So like MMR, varicella, yellow fever. Live vaccine not to be used if the safer inactivity alternative vaccines are available. Like we know, live intranasal influenza, there's a kill intranasal influenza vaccines available. Oral poliomyelitis, we have a inactive kill polio vaccines. Similarly, we have a Japanese encephalitis vaccines, kill one. BCG should not be used in low endemic countries, although risk of adenitis is substantially reduced by early initiation of ART. So babies on ART, that means immune is restored and they can give the BCG vaccination. So immunization in children are current guidelines. If you go through the 2018, that's in 1920, still going on. This is the latest guideline. At birth, you can give the BCG, OPV and Hep B in all the children. But hepatitis B, if the baby is less than 2 kg, 2,000 grams, then you have to defer it for 1 month for hepatitis B only. BCG, OPV and otherwise all the babies can be given and at least it should be introduced within 7 days. OPV and if it's not given in that birth. At 6 weeks, then the Government of India is giving pentavalent vaccines where the 5 vaccines are there, DPT, Hep B and hepatitis B. Along with OPV1, means 1 dose of oral polio vaccine and 1 dose of injectable polio vaccine, that is a fractional dose. Some state is giving the intramuscular dose. If you want to give the intramuscular dose, that is a single dose and that is given in the 14 weeks, not in a 6 weeks. But some states is giving the fractional dose. So it should be given in 6 weeks and 14 weeks, injectable polio. Rotaviral vaccines is recently introduced in the 11 states of our country and gradually it will be covered all over India. In the rotaviral, it means the same schedule and 6, 10, 14 weeks. And PCV also into the 4 states, especially the Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. In this country, they have already started pneumococcal conjugate vaccine. It's launched in 2017. Gradually, it will be included all the states of our country. So in the 10 weeks again, the pentavalent second dose, OPV second dose, and rotavirus second dose. And in 14 weeks, again, whatever they given in the 6 weeks, it should be given in the 14 weeks, pentavalent third dose, OPV third dose, rotaviral third dose. Injectable polio virus is an injectable one, that is a fractional dose, that means it is a route is intradermal. F is fractional and it's given intradermally. If you give intramuscular, then it is single dose. and pneumococcal second dose. At 9 months, it is measles with rubella vaccine. So this is the age, because up to 14 weeks is okay. Babies are not immunocompromised early years, early days, months of the infancy. So usually we know the perinatally acquired infection takes some time to suppress the immunity. So Jolly will give all the babies, all the vaccines must be given in 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks. But while giving the MR vaccine, J and PCV booster at 9 months, at that time you have to see whether baby is symptomatic or not, baby is immunosuppressed or not, baby is infected or not. Because prior to that 9 months, baby has already gone to the DNA PCR and test and already known their status, whether exposed or infected or not infected. So at 9 months, we are very cautious before giving the vaccine, because these are the all MR and J is the live vaccine given by the government of India. The live vaccines is not available in the outside the government. In the market, local market, it is the kill vaccines available, Japanese encephalitis. So while giving the vaccine with the, at 9 months, you should consider the various nutritional status, sign and symptoms HIV, and of course CD4. If it's positive, then CD4. What is the CD4? Then if it is more than 15%, then only you can give the live vaccine. Otherwise, you cannot give this MR and J, but you can give the BCG booster. Again, in 16 to 24 months, same thing implies over here. The MR second dose, and DPT booster and OPV booster and JE booster. If the CD4 count is more than 15%, then only you can give the OPV and JE here. The second booster of DPT at 5 years, and now it is again on 10 years and 15 to 16 years. Previously it was TT, only tetanus toxoid, but now recently it has been introduced the tetanus toxoid with the diphtheria toxins, the TD. Not only T, it is TD, and sometimes in private and the other academic bodies, they are giving TDAP. So you can give the TD at 10 years and 15 to 16 years. 10 years. These are the recent change in the guideline. You always should follow the latest guideline. Now, there is the academic body, Indian Academy of Pediatricians recommended the 2000, this is the latest guideline also, but I have shown it is the government guideline. Now it is our body guideline. So, and the same, but in 6 weeks, they are giving all those vaccines, whatever the government is giving, and 10 weeks also same, 14 weeks, all vaccines are same, except that if you notice, it is a wholesale pertussis, DTWP. And they have given option acellular pertussis. The government of India is giving the wholesale pertussis because immunogenicity is quite high compared to the acellular pertussis. At the primary doses, the immunogenicity may be normal, but the reactivity is a painful and the high fever and all more with the wholesale than the acellular pertussis. So in the private or in the academic body, they are giving the option whether you want to take a WP or AP. At 6 months, there is the influenza vaccine, there's the rabies and typhoid conjugate vaccines by the IP, which is not given by the government of India. 9 months, we are giving the MR, whereas IP recommended the MMR. Then at 12 months, hepatitis A vaccine, 15 months, and again MMR, varicella and booster, 16 to 18 months, all vaccines which are given by the government of India. 18 months, hepatitis A vaccine second dose, and then typhoid vaccines, 4 to 6 years, again same with the introduction of varicella, which is not given by government of India. 9 to 12 years, and TDAP, the government will give TD, and they recommended TDAP. And even HPV vaccines, even papillomavirus vaccines, very important for HIV infected children and adolescents, and that is given by recommended by IP. I'll discuss about the immunocompromised children. They should be given HPV vaccine along with the other vaccines. So adolescent vaccines, TDAP should be given if they are missed in the previously, then 1 TD, TDAP followed by 1 TD, and then 13 to 18 years, 1 dose. AMR, if is not given earlier, of course, while giving this vaccine, you should always keep in mind the signs, symptoms, and the CD4 percentage. Hep B and Hep A, you can give hepatitis B vaccine, hepatitis A vaccine. If not given earlier, you should give in adolescent children, because adolescents are most neglected part of the life. So always take consider the vaccination in adolescent children. HPV vaccine 3-dose schedule, 0, 1 to 2 months and 6 months interval. Typhoid vaccine single dose. Varicella 2-dose vaccine 4 to 8 weeks apart if previously not given. And always take care of the CD4 count. Influenza vaccine, Japanese encephalitis vaccine, and pneumococcal vaccine must be given if they are not given earlier. This is the CDC guideline of recommended immunization schedule for HIV infected children up to 18 years by the CDC. And whatever I've discussed, they have all those vaccines they are also giving, and they have a robust data of giving a rotavirus vaccine. And we see 246 as we give in a 4-6-10 weeks, they give in a 2-4-6 weeks. The good response if you give in 2-4-6 weeks, 6 months, but because of our endemicity prevalence of the disease, we give in a 6-10-14 weeks. And immunocompromised children, they recommended after giving the pneumococcal vaccine, what we are giving in a government of India is also giving, and IP also recommended PCV, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine. But immunocompromised children and adolescents, even in adult also, give another booster vaccine of PCV at the adult after 18 years. And after one vaccine, PCV vaccine, after 8 weeks, give one polysaccharide pneumococcal vaccine, PPSB 23. It's very important to give this vaccine, and one booster after 5 years. That the extra dose should be given in HIV infected children, adolescents, and even in adults. But don't think the injection is safe. We won't take the precaution. Universal precaution should be taken. It should be followed while giving the injectable vaccines. So while giving the vaccines, you should take the universal precaution as we take in other cases while dealing with the providing care to the HIV infected children. Now, one or two words about the adverse events following immunization. Adverse event following immunization is untoward medical occurrence which follows the immunization. I said medical occurrence. So it may be related to vaccine, may not be related to vaccine, which does not necessarily have a causal relationship with the uses of the vaccine. That means while giving the vaccine within 1 month of duration, it is within 1 month. So if there is any event takes place within 1 month of the vaccines, it is AEFI. And there is a body everywhere in all over the India. AEFI is there. We have to report the event following immunization to this AEFI body. And that event may be vaccine product related reactions. So like previously the thiomarsal is an adjuvant agent is added with the vaccine that was causing some autism like reactions. They have studied, done it is nullification was there. Vaccine quality defect related sometimes because they not proper dilution or proper maintaining of the temperature. So vaccine quality is compromised. Immunization error is related, sometimes procedure, sometimes IM injection giving in the middle 1/3 of the anterolateral part of the thigh. They sometimes we have seen is given in the buttock and causes the injection abscess. So and coincidental event. Coincidental event means any event which is not related to vaccine. Suppose a baby is received a vaccine, rotaviral vaccine, a polio vaccine. Thereafter, baby developed RTI. That also within 1 month of time. That also is to be considered as an adverse event following immunization, and it should be informed to the AEFI body. So this is my all, and in nutshell, the conclusion: HIV infected infants and children can safely receive most childhood vaccines, although efficacy may vary, as I was shown by the data. Patients with a severe immunosuppression, that is CD4 less than 15%, should not receive live vaccines, especially MMR and varicella vaccines. Oral polio, intranasal vaccines are contained in HIV infected patient, and of course not only patient and their relatives, their siblings also, if they are, because it can cause the herd immunity. So the other members, if given other children given the oral polio who are not infected, can transmit this disease to the HIV infected children. Immunization status should be reviewed at every visit, and response to vaccination, that is antibody response, ideally should be estimated when indicated. So I have taken the guidelines from these organizations. Thanks to these organizations, and thanks for your patience hearing. If you have any questions, you can write in the chat box. I can answer.
Ma'am, we have 3 questions in the chat box from Dr. Swami. The first question, 2 questions in fact. We are doing hepatitis B testing before starting ART. How often we can repeat the hepatitis B testing?
What about the optional vaccine? Okay.
Yeah, that's the second question.
Actually, ideally, all babies should, it is the good opportunity as we are testing the hepatitis B before ART. If hepatitis B surface antigen is negative, then ideally we should see the antibody titers. If it is less than 10, then we should vaccinate. So this is the opportunity to vaccinate the child again. Because whether the previous history of vaccination is there or not, still we are doing the heavy antigen testing. If negative, then and we should ideally we should do the serum antibody test, and if it's less than 10, we should vaccinate the children. And second question is how often repeat the test. So how often you can repeat the testing? We should not repeat the testing if you give the vaccine at that moment. If as you have before starting AT, you have done the heavy antigen testing, if it's negative, and baby has a history of taking vaccination or not any history of vaccination or doubtful history of vaccination, or vaccination card is lost. That is the most thing happen in our places. So you can give the vaccination at that time also. So if you vaccinate the child, there's no need to repeat testing, and you can do the titer, of course, after last, as I've shown, it should be given the 4 doses, and after 1 month of the last dose, you should see the titer. If titers is more than 10, baby is protected. So you don't have to do the repeat vaccine. Second question was optional vaccine is yes. Human papillomavirus HPV vaccine is there. It should be given both in the male and female child, because it prevents the genital warts and the cervical carcinoma both. So it should be given. And there's 601 and 60 the day of the vaccine. Then after 1 to 2 months, and then after 6 months is available. It should be given, though it is not by the government of India, but we have to arrange for that. Next, any other questions?
No, ma'am. Participants can unmute themselves and ask questions, or they can write in the chat box.
Yes.
Madam, oral polio cannot be given to all CLHIV.
Pardon, I couldn't get it.
Oral polio cannot be given to all CLHIV. Oral polio.
Audio is not clear. Huh? I'm not getting it.
Oral polio cannot be given to all CLHIV.
Oh, oral polio. Are you
That's
asking
the
for
question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am.
oral polio?
You are.
Yes, yes. Oral polio can be given at newborn or infancy, because primary dose we are giving at 0, 6, 10, 14. Thereafter, we are giving injectable polio and again one booster. So at the time of booster, if baby is having till then we have already done the DNA PCR and all. We know the baby is either positive or negative, and or either whether in a exposed but uninfected. The three situation might be there. If negative, okay, no problem. Is ruled out negative, no problem. If infected, then you have to see the sign and symptoms, failure to thrive is there or not, and what is the CD4 count. If CD4 count is low, we cannot give it. But if it's high, you can give it.
No.
Because the government of India is not providing all the children the IPV in the older age. Only 6 and 14. 2 by IPV is given.
Ma'am, there's a question in the chat box. Can the anti-corona vaccine, when it comes, be given to the CLHIV? Can we give it to the CLHIV then?
Oh, this is too early to answer this question. Actually, corona vaccine is still not come. So yeah, I have to come, and I'd rather say a few words about the protective vaccines what we are giving to the children, like BCG vaccine. There's a recent study shown in that the BCG also stimulates T cells, and coronavirus also acts by it conferring some resistance, because there is a UAE, there is a study in UAE, Arab Emirates, and they have studied and they have given a group of person BCG vaccination and one not vaccinated. So they have studied, there is 0 infection among the BCG vaccinated persons, and there are 10% infection, 9.8% infection in a BCG unvaccinated children person. So there is, it confers some immunity. And then MMR vaccine, what we are giving the children, that also gives some protection regarding the coronavirus. So we are not getting so much of corona infections in children, and we are like our college, our hospital is totally COVID hospital. It's converted totally COVID hospital. So we are dealing with many cases of COVID patient. We have more than 60 newborn. Till now we have treated more than 100 newborns also, and adult children also we have treated 160 near about children corona positive children. But the mortality is quite low. Only two cases has died. Out of 160, only 2 patients have died. That too also because of the comorbidity. One was the leukemia, and one was the having cerebral tumor. So I don't think there is a time to comment on the corona vaccine in children and children living with HIV until unless there's a well tested and there's a different trials will be there. Yes, sir. BCG is a study. Yes, that is a good thing. I've seen even in MMR can be given by the adult also. If you go through the CDC guideline, it has been written there clearly. MMR can be given in the adult, and that the 2 doses MMR, 4 to 12 weeks they are, interval. And though it is not having any side effects in children, but it is a bit reactogenic in adult. There is transient parotitis after 2 to 3 weeks of MMR vaccine, and it lasts for 2 to 3 days. So very minimum side effects after MMR vaccine. That too also mumps component, because the mumps component.
Participants, please unmute yourself and you can ask questions.
Any other questions?
Ma'am, I don't think there are any more questions now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this informative session, ma'am. Thank you to the participants for patient listening. We can end the session now.
So
Thank
we're
you, ma'am.
leaving. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.